So, hello and welcome back to the home stretch of Ivanhoe. I think we only have 4 more chapters, which is kind of bananas. We'll be finishing it this week. And then it's going to be time for me to take my little road trip, so we won't be having any reading videos, but I am going to give you the week that I am on my road trip to vote for our next book, which is kind of fun. I've got 3 books picked out. I have to find Bruce again. Bruce is going to be on the list, but I can't remember where I put Bruce, which is typical me. But we do have 2 other books that we will be voting on along with Bruce. I'll put the poll up, probably starting it on Thursday night, which is when I'm going to be leaving on my road trip. But the other 2 books that I managed to find in the public domain that are on our potential for books to read next, and I'm excited about all of them. So one is Bruce. It is by the author who was the author of Lassie, and I have checked to make sure that the dog lives. This is very important when looking at wildlife books. The other book that I found is Tom Swift and His House on Wheels. I don't know much about this, but it looks like it should be just a romp. And book number 3 that we will be voting on is another Jules Verne. I found Around the World in 80 Days. So I think of those 3, any of them sound like they would be fun. So the poll will go up on Thursday. And yeah, just vote for whichever one you want as your favorite. But before we do that, we have to finish Ivanhoe, which is decidedly not a romance. And this next chapter seems really, really long. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. Maybe it'll be the fight for Rebecca's honor. I hope that whoever ends up being her champion actually wins. We have a very short quote at the start of it, and then we will be getting into it, if I can find my glasses. Shadows Avant. Richard's himself again, from Richard III. Very short, very punchy and to the point. I'm hoping that that means that the Black Knight is about to show up. We are going to be jumping back in and reading chapter 40 of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. When the Black Knight, for it becomes necessary to resume the train of his adventures, left the trysting tree of the generous outlaw, he held his way straight to a neighboring religious house of small extent and revenue called the Priory of St. Botolph, to whom the wounded Ivanhoe would have been removed when the castle was taken under the guidance of the faithful Gurth and the magnanimous Wamba. It is unnecessary at present to mention what took place in the interim between Wilfred and his deliverer. Suffice it to say that after long, grave communication, messengers were dispatched by the prior in several directions, and that on the succeeding morning the Black Knight was about to set forth on his journey, accompanied by the jester Wamba, who attended as his guide. "We will meet," he said to Ivanhoe, "at Coinsborough, the castle of the deceased Athelstine, since there your father Cedric holds the funeral feast for his noble relation." I was trying to say that in Wamba's voice. Oops. "I would see your Sexton kindred together, Sir Wilfred, and become better acquainted with them than I have been before. You also will meet me, and it will be my task to reconcile you with your father." Saying this, the Black Knight took an affectionate farewell of Ivanhoe, who expressed an anxious desire to attend upon his deliverer, but the Black Knight would not listen to this proposal. "Rest this day. You will have scarcely strength enough to travel tomorrow. I will have no guide with me but honest Wamba, who can play priest or fool, as I shall be in the most humor." "And I," said Wamba, will attend you with all my heart. I would fain see the feasting at the funeral of Athelstine, for if it be not full and frequent, he will rise from the dead to rebuke the cook, sewer, and the cupbearer, and that would be a sight worth seeing. Anyway, Sir Knight, I trust your valor with making my excuses to my master Cedric in case my own wit fails me. And how would my poor valor succeed, Sir Jester, when your light wit halts? Answer me that. Well, Sir Knight, said Wamba, may do much. He is a quick, apprehensive knave, who sees his neighbor's blind side and knows how to keep the lee gauge when his passions are blowing high, but Valor is a sturdy fellow that makes all the split. He rows against both wind and tide, and makes way notwithstanding. Therefore, good Sir Knight, while I take advantage of the fair weather in our noble master's temper, I will expect you to bestir yourself when his mood grows rough. Sir Knight of the Fetterlock, since it is your pleasure to be said that, said Ivanhoe, I fear that you have chosen a talkative and troublesome fool as your guide, but he does know every path and alley in the woods as well as ever a hunter who frequents them, and the poor knave, as you have seen, is as true as steel. Nay, said the knight, an he have the gift of showing my road, I will not grumble with him that he desires to make it pleasant. Fare thee well, Wilfred. I charge you not to attempt to travel until tomorrow, at the very earliest. And as he said that, he extended his hand to Ivanhoe, who pressed it to his lips, took leave of the prior, and then the Black Knight mounted his horse and departed with Wamba as his companion. Ivanhoe followed them with his eyes until they were lost in the shadows of the forest, and then went back into the convent. But soon after the matin song, Ivanhoe requested to see the prior. The old man came quickly and inquired anxiously after his health. It is better, he said, than my fondest hope could have anticipated. Either my wound has been slighter than the blood led me to suppose, or this balsam has wrought a wonderful cure upon it. I feel already as if I could bear my corslet, and so much the better, for thoughts pass in my mind which render me unwilling to stay here any longer in inactivity. Now, the saints forbid, said the prior, that the son of the Saxon Cedric should leave our convent before his wounds are healed. It would be a shame to our profession if we let you. Nor would I desire to leave your roof, father, said Ivanhoe, if I did not feel myself able to endure the journey and honestly compelled to undertake it. And what could have urged you to such a sudden departure? Asked the prior. Have you never, father, said Ivanhoe, felt an apprehension of approaching evil, for which you in vain attempted to assign a cause? Have you never found your mind darkened like the sunny landscape by a sudden cloud which foretells a coming tempest? And do you not think that such impulses are deserving of attention as being the hints of our guardian angels that there's danger coming? I may not deny, said the prior, crossing himself, that such things have been, and have been of heaven, but then such communications have had a visibly useful scope and tendency. But you, wounded as you are, what avails it that you should follow the steps of him who you cannot aid if he were assaulted? You're being a very bad kitty. Get down. Kitty break. Hang on. He likes the webs. Father, said Ivanhoe, you're mistaken. I am stout enough to exchange buffets with any who will challenge me. But even if it were otherwise, may I not aid him if he were in danger by something other than force of arms? It is but too well known that Saxons do not love the Normans, and who knows what may be the issue if he breaks in upon them when their hearts are irritated by the death of Athelstine and their heads heated by the carousal in which they will be indulging themselves. I hold that his entrance among them at such a moment would be most perilous, and I am resolved to share or avert the danger, which, that I may better do, I would crave of you to use, maybe please loan me a palfrey, whose pace might be softer than that of my war horse. I'm going to get the cat out of the room. All right, troublesome kitty evicted. So Ivanhoe wants a horse that will be a little softer to ride. Surely, said the worthy churchman, you shall have my own ambling jennet, and I would that it ambled as easy for your sake as for the sake of the abbot of St. Albans. But this I will say for Malkin, which is what I call her, that unless you were to borrow a ride on the juggler's steed that practices a hornpipe amongst the eggs, you could not journey on a creature as gentle and smooth-paced. I have composed many a homily on her back for the edification of my brethren of the convent and many other poor Christian souls. Then I pray, reverend father, said Ivanhoe, let Malakin be gotten ready instantly, and please bid Gurth to attend me with my arms. No, no, fair sir, said the prior. I pray you remember that Malakin has as little skill in arms as her master does, and that I warrant that she cannot endure the sight or weight of your full armament. Oh, Malkin, I promise you as a beast of judgment, and will contend against any undue weight, but I did but borrow the fractus temporum from the priest of St. Bees, and I promise you she would not stir from the gate until I had exchanged that huge volume for just my little breviary. Trust me, Holy Father, said Ivanhoe. I will not distress her with too much weight, and if she calls a combat with me, it's odds, but she has the worst of it. He said this while Gurth was buckling on the knight's heels a pair of large gilded spurs capable of convincing any restive horse that his best safety lay in being conformable to the will of his rider. The deep, sharp rowels with which Ivan's heels were now armed began to make the worthy friar repent of his courtesy and say, No, no, fair sir, I bethink me my Malkin cannot abide the spur. Better it were that you tarry for a mare of our Marsipal down at the Grange, which maybe had in a little more than an hour. It cannot be so tractable in respect that she draweth much of our winter firewood, and she does not eat corn. No, thank you, father. I will abide by your first offer, as I see that Malkin is already at the gate. Gurth will carry my armor, and as for the rest, rely on it that I will not overload Malkin's back, and she will not overcome my patience. But farewell. Ivanhoe now descended the stairs more hastily and easily than his wound seemed to promise, and he threw himself upon the jennet, eager to escape the prior, who stuck as close to his side as his age and fatness would permit, now singing the praises of Malkin, and now recommending caution to the knight in managing her. She is at the most dangerous period for maidens as well as for mares, said the old man, laughing at his own joke, being barely 15. Not the funniest joke. Ivanhoe, who had another web to weave than stand canvassing a palfrey's paces with its owner, lent but a deaf ear to the prior's grave advice and poor jokes, and having leapt upon his mare, commanded his squire, for that was what Gurth now called himself, to stay close by his side, and followed the track that the Black Knight had taken into the forest, while the prior stood at the gate of the convent, looking after him and saying, "Saint Mary, how prompt and fiery are these men of war! I would I had not trusted Malkin to his keeping, for crippled as I am with the cold and the rheumatism, I am undone by aught but good befalls her. And yet," he said, remembering himself, "as I would not spare my own old and disabled limbs in the good cause of old England, so Malkin must ever run her hazard on the same venture. And it may be that they will think our poor house worthy of some magnificent treasure, or maybe they will send the old prior a prancing nag. And if they do none of these, as great men will forget a little man's service, well, truly I shall hold me well repaid in having done what was right. And now it is well nigh the fitting time to summon the brothers to breakfast in the refectory. Ah, I doubt they obey that call more cheerfully than the bells for primes and matins." And so the prior of St. Bolthops hobbled back again into the refectory to preside over the stockfish and ale which were just being served for the friar's breakfast. Pursy and important, he sat down at a little table, and many a dark word he threw out of the benefits to be expected to the convent, and high deeds of service that he had done, which at another season would have attracted notice. But as the stockfish was highly salted and the ale was reasonably powerful, the jaws of the brothers were too anxiously employed to admit of their making much use of their ears. Nor do we read of any fraternity who was tempted to speculate upon the mysterious hints of their superior, except Father Diggory, who was severely afflicted by a toothache, so he was only able to eat with one side of his mouth. What was the point of that entire chapter? Sorry, not chapter, but that entire run of paragraphs. Oh well, now we know all about stockfish. Back to the book. In the meantime, the Black Champion and his guide were pacing at their leisure through the recesses of the forest, and the good knight was humming to himself the song of some enamored troubadour, sometimes encouraging by question and the prattling disposition of his attendant, so that their dialogue formed a whimsical mixture of song and joke, of which we would fain give our readers some idea. You are then to imagine this knight, such as we have already described him, strong of person, tall, broad-shouldered, and large of bone, mounted upon his mighty black charger, which seemed made on purpose just to bear his weight, because it so easily paced under it. He had the visor of his helmet raised, in order to admit the freedom of breath, yet keeping the berever, or the under part, closed, so that his features could be imperfectly seen. But his ruddy, embrowned cheekbones could be plainly seen, and the large and bright blue eyes that flashed from under the dark shade of the raised visor, and the whole gesture the look of a champion who expressed careless gaiety and fearless confidence, a mind which was unapt to apprehend danger and promptly defy it when most imminent, yet with whom danger was a familiar thought, as with one whose trade was war and adventure. The jester Wamba wore his usual fantastical habit, but late accidents had led him to adopt a good cutting falchion instead of his wooden sword, with a tange to match it, of both which weapons had, Notwithstanding his profession, he had shown himself a skilful master during the storming of Torquilstone. Indeed, the infirmity of Wamba's brain consisted chiefly in a kind of impatient irritability which suffered him not long to remain quiet in any posture, or to adhere to any certain train of ideas, although he was, for a few moments, alert enough in performing any immediate task or in apprehending any immediate topic. On horseback, therefore, he was perpetually swinging himself backwards and forwards, now on the horse's ears, and then at the very rump of the animal, now hanging both legs on one side, and now sitting with his face to the tail, moping, mowing, and making 1,000 apish gestures, until his palfrey took his freaks so much to heart as to fairly lay him at length on the green grass, something which greatly amused the knight, but compelled his companion to ride in a more normal fashion afterwards. At the point of their journey which we take them up, this joyous pair were engaged in singing a vireal, as it was called, in which the clown bore a mellow burden to the better instructed knight of the Fetterlock. This is how the ditty went. Anna Maria, love is up is the sun. We're going to start that again. Anna Marie, love, up is the sun. Anna Marie, love, morn is begun. Mists are dispersing, love, birds singing free. Up in the morning, love, Anna Marie. Anna Marie, love, up in the morn. The hunter is winding the blithe sounds on his horn. The echo rings merry from rock and from tree. 'Tis time to arouse thee, love, Anna Marie. And then Wamba sings. Oh, Tybalt, love Tybalt, awake me not yet. Around my soft pillow well softer dreams flit. For what are the joys that in waking we prove, compared with these visions, O Tybalt, my love? Let the birds to the rise of the mist carol shrill, let the hunter blow out his horn loud on the hill. Softer sounds, softer pleasures in some lumber I prove, but think not I dreamt of thee, Tybalt, my love. A dainty song, said Wamba, when they had finished their carol, and I swear by my bauble a pretty moral. I used to sing it with Gurth, once my playfellow, and now by grace of God and his master, no less than a freeman. And we once came by the cudgel for being so entranced by the melody that we lay in bed for 2 hours after sunrise, singing the ditty between sleeping and waking. My bones ache at thinking of the time since. None the less, I have played the part of Anna Marie to please you, fair sir. Wamba next struck into another carol, a sort of comic ditty, to which the knight, catching up the tune, replied in the like manner. There came 3 merry men from south, west, and north, evermore sing the roundelay, to win the widow of Wycombe forth. And what was the widow, might them say nay? The first was a knight, and from Tyanda he came, evermore sing the roundelay. And his fathers, God save us, were men of great fame. And where was the widow, might say him nay? Of his father the laird, of his uncle the squire, he boasted in rhyme and in roundelay. She bade him go bask by his sea coal fire, for she was the widow, would say him nay. Next that came forth, swore by blood and by nails, merrily sing the roundelay. Hers a gentleman, God wot, and hers lineage was of Wales, and where was the widow, might him say nay? Sir David ap Morgan, ap Griffith, ap Hugh, ap Tudor, ap Rice, quoth his roundelay. She said that one widow for so many was too few, and she bade the Welshman to wend his way. But then next came a yeoman of Kent, jollily singing his roundelay. He spoke to the widow of living in rent, and where was the widow, could say him nay? So the knight and the squire were both left in the mire, there for to sing their roundelay. For a yeoman of Kent with his yearly rent, there never was a widow who could say him nay. I would, Wamba, said the knight, that our host of the trysting tree, or the jolly friar, his chaplain, heard of this your ditty in praise of our buff yeoman. So I would not, said Wamba, but for the horn that hangs at your baldric. Ay, said the knight, this is a pledge of Locksley's goodwill, though I am not likely to need it. 3 mots on this bugle will, I am assured, bring round at need a jolly band of honor of yonder honest yeomen. I would say heaven forfend, said Wamba, were it not that the fair gift is a pledge that they would let us pass peacefully. What do you mean? Said the knight. Do you think that but for this pledge of fellowship they would assault us? Nay, for me I say nothing, said Wamba, for green trees have ears as well as stone walls. But can you construe me this, sir knight? When is thy wine pitcher and thy purse better empty than when it is full? I would say never, said the knight. Thou never deservest to have a full one in your hand for such a simple answer. You had best empty your pitcher before you pass it to a saxton, and leave your money at home before you walk into a greenwood. You say that our friends are robbers, then? Said the knight. You hear me not say that, fair sir, said Wamba. It may relieve a man's steed to take off his mail when he has a long journey to make, and certes it may do good to the rider's soul to ease him of that which is the root of evil. Therefore will I give no hard names to those who do such things. Only I would wish my mail at home and my purse in my chamber when I meet these good fellows, because it might save them some trouble. We are bound to pray for them, my friend, notwithstanding the fair character that you're giving them. I'll pray for them with all my heart, said Wamba, but in town, not in the greenwood, like the abbot of St. Bees, who they cause to say a mass with an old hollow oak tree as his stall. You say so, Wamba, said the knight. These yeomen did your master Cedric yeomanly service back at Torquilstone. This is true, said Wamba, but that was in the fashion of their trade with heaven. Their trade? What do you mean by that, Wamba? Said the knight. Marry thus, said the jester. They make up a balanced account with heaven, as our old cellarer used to call his ciphering, as fair as Isaac keeps up with his debtors. And like him, they give out very little, and take large credit for doing so, reckoning, doubtless, on their own belief and behalf that the sevenfold usury which the blessed text has promised to a charitable loan. Speak plainly, Wamba. I don't know anything of ciphers or rates of usage, said the knight. Why, said Wamba, and your valor be so dull, you will please to learn that these honest fellows balance a good deed with one not quite so laudable, as a crown given to a begging friar, with 100 bezants taken from a fat abbot, or a wench kissed in the greenwood with the relief of a poor widow. Which of these was the good deed, and which was the felony? Asked the knight. Ah, a good jest, said Wamba. Keeping witty company sharpens your apprehension. You said nothing so well, sir knight, I will be sworn, when you held drunken vespers with the hermit. But to go on, the merry men of the forest set off the building of a cottage with the burning of a castle, the thatching of a choir against the robbing of a church, the setting free of a poor prisoner against the murder of a proud sheriff, or, to come to the point, the deliverance of a Saxon franklin against the burning alive of a Norman baron. Gentle thieves they are, in short, and courteous robbers, but it is ever the luckiest to meet with them when they are at the worst." "What do you mean, Wamba?" said the knight. "Why, because then they have some compunction, and are for making matters up with heaven. But when they have struck an even balance, well, heaven help them with whom they next open an account. The travellers who first meet them after their good service at Torquilstone will have a woeful flaying. And yet," said Wamba, coming up close by the knight's side, "there be companions who are far more dangerous for travellers to meet than those outlaws." "And who may they be? For you have neither bears or wolves, I don't think," said the knight. "Oh, sir, we have Malvision's men-at-arms," said Wamba. "And let me tell you that in time of civil war a half-score of these is worth a band of wolves any time. They're now expecting their harvest, and are reinforced with the soldiers that escaped from Torquilstone, so that, should we meet with a band of them, we are likely to pay for our feats of arms. Now I pray you, Sir Knight, what would you do if we met them?" "Pin the villains to the earth with my lance, Wamba, if they offered us any impediment." "What if there were 4 of them?" "They would drink from that same cup," said the knight. "And what if 6?" said Wamba. "And as we now are barely 2, would you not then remember Locksley's horn?" "What? Sound for aid," said the knight, "against a score of such rascalii as these, whom one good knight could drive before him as the wind drives leaves." "Nay, then," said Wamba, "I will pray you for a close sight of that same horn that has such a powerful breath." The knight undid the clasp of the baldric, and indulged his fellow traveller, who immediately hung the bugle around his own neck. "Tir la la," he said. "Nay, I know my garment as well as any other." "What do you mean?" said the knight. "Give me the bugle back." "Content you, Sir Knight, it is in safe keeping. When valor and folly travel, folly should bear the horn, because she can blow it the best." "Nay, rogue," said the Black Knight, "this exceeds your license. Beware, do not tamper with my patience." "Urge me not with violence, Sir Knight," said Wamba, keeping back away from the impatient champion, "or folly will show a clean pair of heels and leave valor to find his own way through the woods." "No, you have hit me here," said the knight, "and sooth to say, I have little time to jangle with you. Keep the horn if you want, but let us keep moving." "You're not going to harm me?" said Wamba. "I tell you I'm not." "Oh, but please pledge your knightly word on it," said Wamba. "My knightly word I pledge. Only come with your foolish self." "Well then, valor and folly are once more good companions," said Wamba, coming up to the knight's side. "But in truth, I love not such buffets as that you bestowed upon the burly friar when his holiness rolled on the green like a king of the ninepins. And now that folly wears the horn, let valor rouse himself and shake his mane, for, if I mistake not, there's company in yonder bush, and they're on the lookout for us." "What makes you say that?" said the knight. "Because I have 2 or 3 times noticed the glance of a Morin from amongst the green leaves. Had they been honest men, they would have kept to the path, but yon thicket is a choice chapel for the clerks of St. Nicholas." "You know," said the knight, closing his visor. I think that you're definitely right. And in good time did the knight close his visor, for 3 arrows flew at the exact same moment from the suspected spot up against his head and breast, one of whom would have penetrated straight to his brain had it not been turned aside by his visor. The other two were averted by the gorget and by the shield which hung around the knight's neck. "Thank you, armorer," said the knight. "Wamba, let us close with them." And he rode straight into the thicket. He was met there by 6 or 7 men-at-arms, who ran against him with their lances in full bloom. 3 of the weapons struck against him and splintered with as little effect as if they had been driven against a tower of steel. The Black Knight's eyes seemed to flash fire even through his visor. He raised in his stirrups with an air of inexpressible dignity and said, "What do you mean by this?" The men made no other reply than by drawing their swords and attacking him on each side, crying, "Die, tyrant!" "Ha, Saint Edward! Ha, Saint George!" said the Black Knight, striking down a man at every invocation. "Do we have traitors here?" His opponents, desperate as they were, bore back from an arm which carried death in every blow, and it seemed as if the terror of his strength alone was about to win the battle against even such odds, when a knight in blue armor, who had before now kept himself behind the other assailants, spurred forward with his lance, and taking aim not at the rider but at the horse, wounded the noble animal fatally. "That was a low blow," said the Black Knight, as his steed fell to the earth, bearing his rider along with him. At this very moment, Wamba blew the bugle, for everything had happened so speedily that he had not had time to do so sooner. The sound made the murderers retreat once more, and Wamba, though so imperfectly weaponed, did not hesitate to rush in and help the Black Knight rise. "Shame on you, false cowards!" exclaimed the one in the blue harness, who seemed to be the leader. "Do you fly from the empty blast of a horn blown by a jester?" Animated by his own words, they attacked the Black Knight again, whose best refuge was now to place his back against the oak tree and defend himself with his sword. The felon knight, who had taken up another spear, watching the moment when his formidable antagonist was most closely pressed, galloped up against him, hoping to nail him with his lance against the tree, when this was again intercepted by Wamba. The jester, making up with agility for his lack of strength, and little noticed by the assailants, who were busy with their more important object, hovered on the skirts of the fight and effectually checked the fatal career of the Blue Knight by hamstringing his horse with his sword. Horse and man fell to the ground, yet the situation of the Black Knight continued to be very precarious, as he was pressed by several men who were completely armed, and he was beginning to be fatigued by the violent exertions necessary to defend himself on so many points at almost exactly the same moment, when a gray goose shaft suddenly stretched on the earth one of the most formidable of his assailants, and quickly a band of yeomen broke forth from the glade, headed by Locksley and the friar, who, taking ready and effectual part in this fray, soon disposed of all the ruffians, all of whom lay on the ground, dead or mortally wounded. The Black Knight thanked his deliverers with a dignity they had not observed in his former bearing, which before now had seemed rather that of a blunt, bold soldier, more than a person of exalted rank. "It concerns me greatly," said the Black Knight, "even before I express my full gratitude to my ready friends, to discover, if I may, who have been my unprovoked enemies. Open the visor of that Blue Knight, Wamba. He seems to be the chief of these villains." Wamba instantly made up to the leader of the assassins, who, bruised by his fall and entangled under his wounded steed, lay incapable of either escape or any resistance. "Come, valiant sir," said Wamba, "I must be your armorer as well as your equerry. I have dismounted you, and now I will unhelm you." And saying that, and not very gently, Wamba undid the helmet of the Blue Knight, which, rolling to a distance on the grass, displayed to the Knight of the Fetterlock grizzled locks and a face that he did not expect to have seen under such circumstances. "Wadimir Fitzruse," he said in astonishment, "what could urge someone of your rank and seeming worth on such a foul undertaking?" "Richard," said the captive knight, "you know little of mankind, if you knowest not to what ambition and revenge can lead every son of Adam." "Revenge?" said the Black Knight. "I never wrong you. On me you have nothing to revenge." "My daughter, Richard, whose alliance you scorned. Was that not an injury to a Norman whose blood is as noble as your own?" "Your daughter?" said the Black Knight. "A proper course of enmity, and followed up to a bloody issue. Stand back, my masters, I need to speak with him alone. And now, Wadimir Fitzruse, tell me the truth. Confess who sent you on this traitorous deed." "Your father's son," said Wadimir, "who in so doing did but avenge on you your disobedience to your father." Richard's eyes sparked with indignation, but his better nature overcame it. He pressed his hand against his head and remained an instant gazing on the face of the humbled baron, in whose features pride was contending with shade. "You did not ask for your life, Wadimir?" said the king. "He that is in the lion's clutch," said Fitzruse, "knows that it's needless." "You can still have it, even unasked," said Richard. "The lion preys not on a fallen carcass. Take your life, but with this condition, that in 3 days you will leave England and go hide your infamy in your Norman castle, and that you will never mention the name of John of Anjou as connected with your felony. If you are found on English ground, after the space I have given you, you die. Or, if you break anything that you can attain the honor of my house, well, by St. George, not even the altar will offer you sanctuary. I will hang you out to feed the ravens from the very pinnacle of your own castle. Let this knight have a horse, Locksley, for I see that your yeomen have caught those that were running loose, and let him leave unharmed." "But that I judge that I listen to a voice whose behest must not be disputed," said Locksley, "I would send a shaft after the skulking villain that should spare him the labor of any journey." "You have an English heart, Locksley," said the Black Knight, "and well do you judge that you are more bound to obey my rule. I am Richard of England." At these words, pronounced in a tone of majesty suited to his rank, and no less distinguished character of Coeur de Lion, all of the men all at once kneeled down before him, and at the same time they tendered their allegiance and implored pardon for any of their crimes. "Rise, my friends," said Richard in a gracious tone of voice, looking at them with a face in which his habitual good humor had already conquered the blaze of hasty resentment, and whose features retained no mark of the late desperate fight, except maybe for the flush of exertion. "Arise," he said. Arise, my friends, your misdemeanors, whether in forest or field, have been atoned by the loyal service that you rendered to my distressed subjects at Torquilstone, and the rescue which you have this day done to your sovereign. Arise, my liegemen, and be good subjects in the future. And you, brave Locksley. No longer Locksley, my liege. Know me under the name which I fear fame has blown too widely not to have reached even your ears. I am Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest. King of the outlaws, prince of the good fellows, said the king. Who has not heard a name which has been borne as far as Palestine? But be assured, brave outlaw, that no deed done in our absence, and in the turbulent times to which it is given rise, shall be remembered as a disadvantage. Truly, says the proverb, said Wamba, when the cat is away, the mice will play. What, Wamba, are you here? Said Richard. I have been so long of hearing your voice that I thought you had taken flight. Me? Take flight? Said Wamba. When did you ever find folly, being separated from valor? There lies the trophy of my sword, that good grey gelding, whom I heartily wish upon his legs again, conditioning his master lay there hoed in his place. It's true, I gave a little ground at first, for a motley jacket does not brook lance heads as a steel chest will. But if I fought not at sword's point, you will at least grant me I sounded the horn. And to good purpose, Wamba, said King Richard. Your good service will not be forgotten. Confitor, confitor, exclaimed in a submissive tone a voice by the king's side. My Latin will carry me no farther, but I confess my deadly treason, and pray leave to have absolution before I'm executed. Richard looked around and saw the friar on his knees saying his rosary, while his quarterstaff, which had not been idle during the fight, lay on the grass beside him. His face was gathered so as he thought might best express the most profound contrition, his eyes being turned up and the corners of his mouth pulled down, as Wamba said, like the tassels at the mouth of a purse. Yet this demure affection of extreme penitence was whimsically belied by a ludicrous meaning which lurked in his huge features and seemed to pronounce his fear and repentance alike as hypocritical. Why are you cast down, you mad priest? Said Richard. Are you afraid your diocesan shall learn how truly you served Our Lady in St. Dunstan? Hush, man. Fear it not. Richard of England betrays no secrets that pass over the flagon. Nay, most gracious sovereign, said the hermit, well known to the curious in penny histories of Robin Hood by the name of Friar Tuck. That is not the courtier, I fear, but the sceptre. Alas, that my sacrilegious fist should ever have been applied to the ear of the Lord's anointed one. Ha, said Richard. Is that what you're worried about? In truth, I had forgotten the buffet, though my ear sung after it for an entire day. But if the cuff was fairly given, I will be judged by the good men around, and if it was not well repaid, or if you think I might still owe you another hit, you can stand up and I will hit you again. By no means, said Friar Tuck. I had my own returned, and with usury. May your majesty ever pay your debts so fully? I could do so with my fists, said the king. My creditors should have little reason to complain of an enemy exchequer. And yet, said the friar, resuming his demure, hypocritical face, I know not what penance I ought to perform for that sacrilegious blow. Speak no more of it, brother, said the king. After having stood so many cuffs from payums and misbelievers, I were the void of reason to quarrel with the hit of a clerk so holy as you. Yet, honest friar, I think it would be best for both church and you that I should procure a license to unfrock you, and keep you as a yeoman of our guard, serving in care of our person, as formerly you were intendant upon the altar of St. Dunstan. My liege, said the friar, I humbly crave your pardon, and you would readily grant my excuse, did you but know the great sin of laziness that besets me. St. Dunstan, may he be gracious to us, stands quiet in his niche, though I should forget my orisons while I go kill a fat buck. I stay out of my cell, sometimes an entire night, doing, well, I do not know what. St. Dunstan, though, never complains. A quiet master he is, and peaceful as ever was a maid of wood. But to be a yeoman in attendance upon my sovereign the king, the honor is great, doubtless, yet if I were but to step aside, to comfort a widow in one corner, or kill a deer in another, it would be, where is that dog priest? Who has seen the accursed friar Tuck? The unfrocked villain destroys more venison than half the country. That's what they would all say. And another would say, he is hunting after every doe in the country. In fine, good my liege, I pray you leave me as you found me, or, if that you desire, extend your benevolence to me, so I may be considered as the poor clerk of St. Dunstan's cell in Copenhurst, to whom any small donation would be acceptable. I understand, said the king, and the holy clerk shall have a grant of vert and venison in my woods of Warncliffe. Mark, however, I will but assign you 3 bucks every season, and if that does not prove an apology for your slaying 30, well, I am no Christian knight or true king. Your grace may be well assured, said the friar, that with the grace of St. Dunstan, I will find the way of multiplying your gift. I don't doubt that, brother, said the king. And as venison is but dry food, our cellarer shall have orders to deliver to you a butt of sack, a runlet of malvesion, and 3 hogshead of ale of the first strike every year. If that will not quench your thirst, well, you must then come to court and become more acquainted with my butler. But for St. Dunstan, said the friar, a cope, a stole, and an altar cloth you will also have, said the king. But we may not turn our game into earnest, lest God punish us for thinking more about our follies than his honor. Oh, I could answer for my patron, said Friar Tuck. Answer for yourself, friar, said King Richard, somewhat sternly, but immediately he stretched out his hand to the hermit, who was somewhat abashed, and bent his knee and saluted. You do less honor to my exalted palm than to my clenched fist, said Richard. You did only kneel to the one, the other one you prostrated yourself to. But the friar, afraid perhaps of again giving offense by continuing the conversation in too joyous a style, a false step to be particularly guarded against by those who converse with kings, just bowed and fell against the rear. And at the exact same time, 2 additional people appeared upon the scene. And that is the end of the chapter. And that was a weird one. I guess that was me dropping my glasses on the floor. I guess that was a meanwhile back on the ranch type chapter. This does not forward what's going on with Rebecca, and we now only have 3 chapters until the end. But I guess long live King Richard? We'll go with long live King Richard. Anyway, that is the end of the chapter. I hope that you enjoyed it. It seemed a little confusing to me. That could be because I was the one reading it out loud, so hopefully it made more sense to you guys. Sometimes I've noticed when I'm reading out loud, especially a book that I don't know yet, sometimes it seems like the words just become nonsense words. And then I go back and read it again and it all makes sense. So maybe I will do that before tomorrow's chapter. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed that. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind, and I will see you later.